Hey, my name's Bruce Snell. I'm with BSG International, and today we're going to be looking at class number 26 is Reviving Base Values in America. And we're going to talk about a lot of different things, plus we're going to kind of bring together some of the things that we have learned and really step back and focus at what this whole certificate program of this applied business science has really focused on. What you're going to see here is that what you have learned here and the materials that you have, you can literally take it back and apply, and you won't need to buy another training program. There's enough stuff here to keep y'all busy from here on out. Now, if you recall, we have been talking about bringing together the awareness and understanding not only of others but of ourselves, to kind of pull in this personal with the process things we've been covering. Okay, now if you'll look at page number 1 in our class there, it says Applied Business Science, Continuance and Growth. We're looking at what in the world is it going to take for us as an organization to what we call for continuance and growth. We're saying to be able to stay in business, build the business, and grow it, and manage it and hang on to it, not let it just go like a fish flopping on the deck there. But what we're saying is that to get control of it. We're doing a little bit of some of the stuff on our leadership. If you look at the existing way of doing business, and over to the right, we have breaking through the 4 barriers to quality. Now, we only have 4 or 5 points here, but what we really want you to do is to think about these particular points, because in themselves they really make a strong statement. But I'm going to ask y'all, I'm not like this 1-minute manager thing or whatever it is. I want y'all to really think about what we're talking about here and how what we say and do and been able to apply, that you're going to be able to take it back and understand and have the awareness to be not only proactive but have the tools to fix, define, and continuously improve your organization. If you look at the existing way of doing business, and the reason we say that is at how most of us are doing business without the 4 barriers to quality awareness. It says, who's to blame? Now, again, I'm kind of being naive and assuming that we've all had some problems before. So if your organization has never had any problems, maybe y'all better get some water, because we're going to talk to some of the folks here that we have some problems. Who's to blame? When there's a problem internally within the organization, and that can be from the fact that, number 1, our customer is unhappy, we didn't get our orders out the door, the customer service hadn't been following up, we're not processing payroll, we're not processing accounts receivable, we're not answering the phones, or whatever it is, we're looking at who's to blame. Now think about that out of that problem. Our first reaction is, who is it that we're going to blame? We want to go jump on somebody to make sure somebody's going to pay for whatever it is that happened. That's the way we do. Do you think it's any different than with our kids or our spouse? We're saying here of what we're talking about, the awareness, is to step back and look at how do we fix the process. Now, this is a radical approach to it compared to how we usually do it. We're saying who's to blame. On the other hand, we're saying fix the process. We're not even concerned with who's to blame. We want to look at the process, because there was a problem because of the process. We need to look at the process. If our employees are making mistakes, our first question is, look at the process. If we're not meeting customers' expectations or commitments, let's look at the process. So again here, who's responsible? Again, we have a problem. We want to find out who's responsible for the problem. I want to know the reason this thing happened. We want to turn it around and go, fix the process. Define the process. This is what we're saying here of building the infrastructure, because we talk about the continuous improvement and all that other stuff. We're kind of the low-tech side of all this stuff that's out there. We're kind of the guys that are focusing on building the infrastructure. We're kind of the guys that are focusing on not the glamour stuff, but building this infrastructure internally. working with our employees and working with our students to help build an awareness and understanding of these things that might not be glamorous, but in fact they're important to and vital to the organization for its continuance and growth. Here, next time you find yourself saying who's responsible, look at it and fix the process. If it happens to be we didn't get the order out, let's look at the order process. Remember the base work center stuff. We've taken the organization, broke it apart, basically by systems, taken it further apart all the way through the organization by base work centers. What we're trying to do is to get these base skills to everybody in the organization where they can continually improve how they're doing business. So in fact, instead of having this one or two people up at the top of the organization trying or saying that they want to be a world-class organization, or they want to do, I love the other one, best practices, and they want to do all these things. What we're saying here is that build the strength of the organization, and your organization is going to be set for continuance and growth. So number 3 is meet the specifications. This is another interesting thing. We just get beat with meet the specifications. What we need to be doing instead of meeting the specs of that particular deal or that particular requirement is continuously improve the people, the process, and procedure. Don't be contented with we're getting the specs. We want to continuously look at that process so we're meeting the spec of that, so we're producing this thing right here. What we're saying is, yeah, we're producing this. We want to look at the process that it's taken to build this thing. We want to look at how we can get the variation out of that process. We want to look at how we can squeeze that variation down. That'll in turn make it more efficient, cut our cost of doing business, and it's going to lower our price to our customer. And if you look at this, again, instead of being contented, we're within spec. That's not good enough. Yes, we're meeting currently, that's fine, we're in the spec, but underneath, we constantly have to be turning the wrench on those systems. We constantly have to be working on those processes. That's what we have management and leadership. We need to be getting that leadership in that direction through the organization. That's why I think after you've looked at this, and we've been together now for about 30 hours, you're going to see why it's so important of these base skills throughout the organization. If you look at it, not look at we're meeting spec, but in fact we're continually improving at the people, the process, and procedure. That's priority of what we've got to do. And yes, I don't want anybody emailing me saying, oh, you want us to fix the process and go out of business. No, don't even insult anybody with that. What we're saying here is that we continually have to improve by the base work center doing that job, our processes and people, and our product and service. Hit the numbers. Ooh, I love that one. Hit the numbers. Focus on the process. Instead of sitting in those meetings talking about hitting the numbers, I'm not saying not use the numbers kind of as some guidelines, but don't run your organization on visual numbers. It's not giving you a true picture of what's happening internally within the organization. If you look at the hit the numbers, we're again saying focus on the process. If we cut 10% out of anywhere in the organization, have we improved any process? No. If you look at it now, is that if we cut 20%, if we cut 3%, have we improved the process? No, we haven't. We're looking at here at hitting the numbers, but at what expense? Long term, it's going to cost us. If the whole mentality of the organization is just focusing on numbers, that all I'm doing is looking at my P&L and figuring how I'm going to cut expenses. I need to be continually looking at these information centers with these process and steps. I continually need to be meeting with my employees, my co-workers. I continually need to be looking at, in these teams, the process, the steps, the procedures, our internal customer and supplier, our external customer and supplier. We continually need to focus in on our people, on our processes, how we're doing business, how we're handling and interacting with our customers. Hit the numbers. By hitting the numbers, getting your numbers, you have not improved a business one iota. You more than likely have got your numbers at somebody else's expense. And probably right now I'm not the most popular girl at the dance here by saying this, but we've been cranking them out, and all we're doing is looking at the numbers. We really need to take this to heart and look at these processes. This is what we've been building this whole thing to, is that, remember, every time you're sitting there looking at cutting the cost of doing business, we need to spend that energy on looking at defining and improving our processes. Hitting the numbers isn't going to do it by itself. All we're doing when we're hitting the numbers, all we're doing is cutting expense. And again, and that's one of the things that Dr. Deming said, is that running a company on visual numbers, you're cutting your way to disaster. And guys, and remember now, we've gone through a couple of decades now where we've cut every bit of equity and heart out of our organization. The other interesting thing here is the incentives and bonus in the existing way. Now, I've been in some of those high-tech companies where they're riding around on scooters in the hallway and they're doing all this stuff, and they're the darlings of Delaware. And what we're saying here, a lot of them boys a few months ago that were the talk of the town and being on front of every magazine known to man ain't even in business now. They weren't even focusing on. We have to focus on the infrastructure. We have to focus on our people. And guys, we have to generate cash revenue to support us being in business. This thing of what we've been going through is not acceptable business practice. And that's a whole nother issue that we'll talk about in our Reviving Base Value in America book. If you look at this, the incentives and bonuses, I've seen them to where, oh, it sounds good, it looks good, we're all on these vision things, we're all on these focus groups, we're all in these things to figure out, to get our bonus, that's going to motivate our people, that's going to get them out there doing what's best. All that's going to do is make sure they get their bonus and their incentives. The product's gone second, the customer has gone second or third. The whole emphasis of the organization, think about it, has not gone to the customer, the process, our employees. It's all gone to getting our bonus and incentives. And if you look at that by, again, giving an incentive or a bonus, you start creating competition internally within the organization. And when you start doing that, you start sacrificing, number one, the integrity of the organization, but also, too, what happens, our customer starts losing, because I'm not going to send that truck back out there to pick something up, because that'll run me into overtime and I'm going to lose my bonus or my incentive point. So if you look at that, so what has happened, the best thing for the customer to do is not necessarily the best thing, or what we can do for our customer, it's not necessarily the best thing for me to do internally in this bonus or incentive program. See, and then from a quality standpoint, and we're really given a new definition to quality and a new awareness and understanding to quality throughout the organization, is that if you look at the incentive or bonus stuff, again, it's not nowhere close to focusing on how we're doing business. And so what happens, we got the organization going in every different way known to man. And yeah, these them little groups that we started, create your own profit center, do that, and we got everybody running around and they're just happier than tar, but they're sitting there beating the junk out of our other departments, our other divisions, to make sure they get their price. And guess what? Again, it's not the customer. It's literally what's best for the incentive and the bonus. So look at, on our thing, on what we're talking about, breaking through the 4 barriers to quality, it's invest in the people and process. If you're going, I'm going to give a bonus, or we're going to do that, take that cash and give to our people. Raise their pay, do whatever, but don't put that bonus or incentive stuff on there. It's ridiculous. It still has not worked. Now, you might have some companies out there that are in growth industry and growth markets that are doing this. Well, they happen to be making it right now. You'll look down the road, they won't be, those things won't work, because how can they work? The systems and the processes aren't in place to even monitor. And then my question is that even though I'm getting my bonus for selling, let's say, a widget, the guy that's producing it and packing it, how come they're not included? So if you look at it, it's really hard. And what I find on these incentives and bonuses, we're spending 95% of our time defending or justifying why we should get them, or what that cost was not mine, it was that other department. The reason I did it, that we ought to get that thing back to raise my bonus to do this and that. So do you think if I have a bonus structure that's a part of my pay because I'm going to make sure you're going to work, and I've got a widget right here that's got to go out the door, and I got to get 100 of them to get my bonus, and that thing's not necessarily right, what do you think I'm going to do? Because immediately I'm going to think about, ooh, am I going to be able to pay the house payment? Am I going to be able to feed the family? Am I going to be able to make sure that I'll take that vacation, or I get them braces for my kid? What are we going to do? We're going to put that product out there. Got my 100, got my bonus. Now, where does that show up? That's going to show up in a dissatisfied customer. Now that's going to show up in reruns or redos or whatever it is. Now that's created more work for our customer service. So all of a sudden their productivity's gone down. If you look at it, that's what we're doing. We're shifting all these things around in an informal organization, other than building the structure of that organization to where we can manage, plan, schedule, and monitor it. So we're looking at, it's really interesting in government and education right now, they're starting to incorporate this stuff. And my daughter's in school, it's absolutely ridiculous. They ain't even defined how they're doing business in the educational industry, but they're giving incentives and bonuses. They will get the numbers. I guarantee you, whatever number, whatever incentive, whatever thing we're saying that they have got to have, they're going to get the numbers. And it's not that we're almost making them cheats. We're almost making them cheat in order to get what's due to them, which is a paycheck. I would rather just pay them and pay them fair and look at that, but we have to look at the system. The educational and government is a perfect example. We keep throwing cash at it. We keep throwing money at it, but we have never defined how we're doing business. Think of that. We've never have defined who's our internal, external customer. We've never looked at the processes. We never even looked at why in the world are we still doing business the way that it is. So if you look at down at the bottom, and I love that, the new day every day. When your existing way of doing business, we're saying we open the door and walk into a concrete brick wall, fall back. We haven't learned anything from the day before. When you have the 4 barriers to quality awareness, you're now looking around. You now have an awareness of why things are happening, because now with the 4 barriers awareness, we now know where to go to fix that thing. And we also know it's not going to do any good to sit there to beat the tar out of our people, or sit there and beat the tar out of our suppliers, or sit there and create these incentives and these bonuses. We know it's not going to do any good to try to get somebody that is responsible or to blame somebody. We already know that's not going to work. What we have to do is work on the process, figure out how we're doing business. This is where we need to be focusing as an organization. And again, the employee is powerless to do it without leadership given a tool. Hopefully what we've learned and talked about here, you're going to have that tool to take it back and apply it. But believe me, it's going to be and take time. You're not going to go back tomorrow and do it. This is from here on out, the way that you're doing business. I told you when I first got started, they were saying we couldn't do 2-year training programs. Now we're getting requested by our customers to go to 3. Now we're looking at going to 5 years. Now we're looking at continuous, because what they're saying is that we need continuous reinforcement. We need continuous direction. We need someone there to help us through all this, to keep us going in the right way, because it's so easy to get caught up internally within that organization to where we're not looking at what's out there, and we stop doing the things that made us who we are. Let's look at the applied business science permutation. And that means kind of a radical change, kind of like what all this stuff we're talking about in the 4 barriers to quality. If you look at it, it says defining how you're doing business, the building of business infrastructure. Our applied business science, really what we're doing is giving a skill that you can take and apply specific to your job. When you walk into your job, it's like that skilled mechanic or maintenance person that can go look at it, they know what they got to do, they know what tools they need to fix it, they know how long it's going to take to fix it, and they can probably tell you how to replace it, redefine it, redo it better than what it is right now. That's what we're giving you with this ABS, is that specific base skill that can apply specifically towards your job, your base work center. Now look at the introduction of new product or service. As we're looking at here, what are we looking at doing? We continually need to look at the introduction of new product or service. We can't be complacent with currently how we're doing business. We have to continually, our management meetings, our leadership meetings, our team meetings and our employees, not only focusing on that process and defining it and continuously improve it, but what are the new things that are out there? Is there new materials? Is there new software? Is there a new process that we can use to help lower our cost of doing business to our customers? These are the things that we're talking about here, a continually introduction and focusing on new product and service. Is that we're looking at, as we're doing business, whether it is a service or a product, is there something that we can enhance that service that maybe only cost us $1, but we get a $5 return out of it? Is there something that we're doing with this widget that we're producing, if we were to turn it this way, that would open up a whole nother market? But if you look at it, we get so caught up in this informal organizational structure that what happens is we lose sight of everything known to man other than that fire that's sitting there burning in our hands right there. And all we're doing is reacting, whoop, trying to put that thing out. Once it goes out, it starts up somewhere else and we're running over there to put it out. So if you look at how this applied business science works, we really need to focus on the introduction of a new product and service. Also, we're looking at the introduction of new processes and new processes to support our new product and service. So not only are we looking at what product or service, but also too new processes or support of our product and service. Let's look at the things. Let's continually not only look at how we're doing business, but look at where we're going and look at a continual introduction and focus on new product and service and those processes to either create or support those particular product or service. Now let's look at the improvement of existing products and service. Y'all thought I was going to leave that one out, didn't you? We're saying here it's 2-tier. Is that I think what would happen is that what we should do and what's all, we're saying we know exactly what we got to do. Here we need to looking at existing processes. How can we continually improve them? We're looking at our existing product and service. How can we continually improve it? So if you look at, we're really running a dual thing here, is that not only are we continually wanting to improve how we're doing business, improve our process and improve our product and service, but we're also up here looking at how in the world are we going to bring on new products and service, and how in the world are we going to bring on new processes. This should be the focus of the leadership of the organization. But before we get here, like all this other stuff that's out there, until we build that infrastructure, focusing on our people, process, and procedure, it's going to be tough to do it. Because remember, a lot of it, not only we don't have the tools, we don't have the discipline internally to do it. The improvement of existing system processes that in turn create, support the product or service. So not only are we looking at bringing on or basically improving our product and service, but those processes that support or create those. So if you look at it, that's really what we're in business for, and that's really what we need to be focusing, because everything else is going to back into that. So this is where we're here. So that's going to take care of, and the focus is continually improving how we're doing business, as well as looking at new opportunities, new things out there to expand what we're doing or enhance the quality of our product, or to bring and open up a new market that we have. We might have a piece of equipment or a piece of software that we're selling that with a very little tweaking can go to several other different applications. These are the things that we need to be thinking about. Also, remember all these great inventions that have been out here, no one else could see them except for the founder or that person that basically created it. So there's probably opportunity all around us. Until our awareness grows, we're not going to see it. It's like it's just going by too fast. This is where we're saying like the game slows down. Next, we want to look at the barriers to quality awareness. Now, we've talked about this, and I think if nothing else, you're going to see why and how these 4 barriers to quality are so important, why we have to have this awareness and understanding of these 4 barriers to quality. It's really simplified it as far as where are our problems. They're right there. Now we're giving you the tools. Now we can start working on these things and getting our people involved. Remember, there's nothing better than sitting down at dinner all excited about something that you're working on, something that you're bringing an improvement to the organization, something that's got you challenged, because that's going to force you to grow and it's going to encourage you to grow as an individual. Then as you're doing that, all the other skills and awareness are going right with it. Next is our base values, which is the foundation of principles and rules that determine conduct and habit, which in turn affect all employees' common welfare. The company must hold and be held accountable for the base values. The underlying structure is built on the 2 rules. The 2 rules are do what's morally and ethically correct and treat everybody as you want to be treated. Now, I'm going to probably get in trouble with some of the corporate counsel out there, but we were actually with one of those companies that had a corporate counsel on site, and we talked about this base values and everything in the program up front. They want to run by counsel to make sure we're doing what's right. And so when we showed them this sign-off sheet on these base values, they're going, Bruce, can you imagine the liability if we were to sign that? And I go, can you imagine your liability if you don't? Kind of interesting, isn't it? We never really looked at it that way. So what we're saying here, if we're going to talk it and do it, we need to put it in writing and continuously focus in on it and reinforce that. But what things that keep that from happening, let's throw some incentives and some bonuses in there. Ooh, now what do you want me to do? What's right? Send that part out? But you've tied me to a bonus. I can't make my car payment. You see what we're talking about? So what am I going to do? I'm going to send that widget out. I just violated those 2 rules. But you've put me in a position to where I can't win. This is what we're talking about. You've given me 2 sharp sticks, and you're going, okay, Bruce, which one of those do you want to stick in your eye? I'm going, okay, how about that one? I go, oh, that hurts. And then you come back to me and go, well, Bruce, you're the one that stuck that stick in your eye. And we're going like I had a choice. Which one? This is what we're doing to our people and to our organizations. So if you look at this, this is why a lot of the things that are being cranked out there of how these new things and new ways to do business and things to focus on will never get off of our people and our customers. But we're kind of really getting cute out there with a lot of fancy stuff other than focusing on the basics. And you know what's amazing? All those companies out there, I'd say 85, 90% of them, the ones we never hear about, they're all focusing on the basics. They're all having lunch with their customers. They're all interacting with their employees. They're all sitting there trying to do and contribute to the organization. Again, like Gordon Harbert, I hate to keep bringing him up, but what a perfect example. Here he is involved in everything in the community. Not only is he involved and have a successful business, but he's leading in the community. People can't wait to go to work for them because guess what? They pay a little higher benefits than everybody else. They spend a little more time with their employees, but our employees stay and our business has grown. And we've been able just in the last few years to be able to start 2 new companies and buy a bankrupt company and bring it in with the existing personnel and management that we have in place. We might have hired 1 more or 2 more, but that's basically it. We've done it with our existing personnel. Yeah, now the support people, we kind of doubled our employee base, but what that also does is that the reason why we need to have the infrastructure defined. How are we going to train these people? These are the things that we need to be thinking about. Now let's look at number 2. It says class summary. It says prejudice perception. We're looking at here, our managers are really, if you look at it, are like everybody else. We're all caught up in this prejudice perception. We're all looking at that deal point based off of our past experiences and whatever sack of rocks we happen to be carrying around. So the issues that you're dealing with as a manager not necessarily has to do with you, not necessarily has to do with your company. It might have to do with the other company. It might have to do with the way they were brought up. It might have to do with their problems or issues at home. It might have to do with their co-workers. This is what we're talking about, is that the issues that we're dealing with today usually have nothing to do with on the table of what we're at. It's having to do with everything else around the table, but we don't take time to get there. We ain't got time. And you notice you never got time. Good things happening. We're saying there's a lot of good things happening out there. And how we end up remembering 7 negative actions to every 1 positive. What we need to do is to think and focus and reinforce all the good things that are happening in our lives. Whether we're looking at the fact that, hey, the cost of materials went down, whatever it is. We want to look at, that's where we're talking about taking account of our wins. There's a lot of good things, there's a lot of positive things out there. But the sad thing is the biggest influence on most of us and impact is through the media, which the media is usually negative, and we call it police blotter reporting. You're trying to tell me that listen to all this negative stuff day in and day out is not having an effect on us. Yeah, I guarantee you that it's having an effect on us. And if you look at, it was interesting, we had a couple of plants up near Fresno, California, kind of central California. And one of the interesting things, we were at the hotel and they were showing a news clip. And they had some kids at a nursery school, or whatever they call them now, and they were anywhere from 4 to 5, 6 years old. And what was interesting, they were showing this Barney cartoon. And it had the camera on the kids from behind and Barney, and had another camera that was kind of showing. Well, the kids, what were they doing? They were laughing, they were smiling, they were clapping, and they were having a good time. And what's interesting, we start bashing that because, oh, if I hear one more Barney, if I hear this, if I hear that, that's something positive. That's something that's up. It's not meant for adults. But all of a sudden, we got a group out there telling us that, hey, it's not cool. We start bashing it. Then another interesting thing, they also showed in a clip of this Power Rangers. I think that's what they were called. I don't know if they're still around, but see, that's my question is that they're not still around, but what damage have they done? And the way we're doing it, we're continually reinforcing all this. So they showed the Power Rangers. And what happened was, it showed the kids change from smiling, laughing, and clapping to where some were getting aggressive with other kids to where they were actually over there in the corner and they were like trying not to get beat up on. So tell me that junk doesn't affect us and doesn't affect our kids. This is where we're saying example for that. Quality starts at the beginning of the process. That particular industry has set the parents up as what we call final inspector. That's like our quality inspector. That's like sitting there putting out some widgets and going, hey, let's see if they like it or not. Oh, they don't like that. If we did that in business, producing a widget, we'd be out of business. And if you look at it, that's where we say the base values and the integrity and the accountability and the responsibility starts at the beginning of the process. And when our kids have access to it, we have a greater responsibility. And we're looking at really the awareness of the negative influence. We're looking at the organizational leadership we need in our country to look at the organization. There's a lot of good companies out there that are having and are doing positive things and positively reinforcing their communities and their employees. I think our organizations and our businesses are going to have to take the leadership, because right now it's not happening, and it hasn't happened, and it's gotten less and less now. So us that are in business, that are trying to do the right thing, we need to really look at taking that leadership position, which there's a lot of us, but you media folks need to cover that. Now let's look at the universities of tomorrow. I'm saying that our universities are going to be on our, someday in our home, but eventually we need to focus and make education, make awareness, make understanding a part of the job at our workplace, because 93 to 97% of our population is at work. Most of us are working 40 to 60 hours a week. We ain't got time to go nowhere else. We need to pay our people and help educate them, help give them awareness, and help them grow, because in turn we'll reap the benefits of the organization. And whether we like it or not, that's what we've got to do. Now let's look at the good organizations. There's again what we're saying, there's a ton of good organizations. The summary is that look at the 4 barriers to quality and how we're interacting with them. And also too, remember, how do we usually address conflict? We don't, or it's with conflict. Now let's look at kind of a synopsis of all this stuff that we've been talking about. If you look at, we really wanted to give a focus on the 4 barriers to quality awareness of how it's interacting in our organization. We want you to be able to walk back into your place and look at a problem or an issue, and hopefully even before it becomes an issue or a problem, and know what we got to do to fix it. Number 1 is fear, lack of communication, lack of written procedure, and lack of training. And if we identify it, that's going to tell us what we got to do. Also, we want to look at the base infrastructure. Pulling the organization apart, this huge complex organization. We want to pull it apart by systems. Then we want to take it a further step and tear it apart by base work centers. And then as we're doing that, we want to give our employees the base skills to continuously improve their process. We want to give them a challenge. We want to give them the tools, not only for continuance and growth of themselves, but for the organization. Then it says a system base. A system base is what we're talking about, breaking it in to our base work centers, looking at everything in the organization as a system. And it really starts with that order request, because remember, all of us here revolve around the supporting, the processing, the product or the service of that order. So we all need to be involved and build around that particular system. So again, if you look at it, so we're talking about the 4 barriers to quality awareness. We want to look at the infrastructure, the structural side of it. Then we want to look at the systems base, look at the organization as systems, and then we want to look at the personal preventive and corrective actions. Because see, this is the thing that we're talking about. The corrective actions, meaning we got problems, where we have given you some processes to address those problems, whether they're not defined systems, not defined process and steps, or they're problems of process and also of people, and we can address those with our quality issues. So if you look at that, we want to really focus in on those skills with our brainstorming for problems and also our task team skills. We also want to look at it from a strategic planning. Now this is where we need to formalize that strategic planning, and that is that number one, a great way to start the strategic plan or project management, whatever it is that we really want to focus in on and define that business infrastructure. That's a good way and a good place to start, because out here it's much more tough or chaos if we don't have that infrastructure in place. So if you're looking at what are we saying, we really have to get in there and start defining how we're doing business. And how are we going to do that? By base work center and by those base skills of our employees. So we also throw in there the preventive and corrective action. So the preventive meaning, let's define the systems. Instead of bringing on that product and marketing the heck out of it, not even working on how in the world are we going to, number one, deliver it, or number one, how we're even going to answer customer service calls, we really need to look at the proactive and the corrective action. So if you look at this, the great strategic plan would be set up your organization into these teams, into these task teams with these base skills to look at starting to build that infrastructure of the program. Also at the same time, get them up there and we start looking at new products and services out there and new processes to support or that create that product and service. Next is the analytical skills. This is some of the things that we were talking about. Let's look at what were some of those skills, and that was at break even. Basically knowing our cost of doing business to where we can make some decisions to help out and do some projections to grow that business and to grow that process. Also too, that strategic planning. The strategic planning could be done by anybody. And if you look at it, project management, what's a project? It could be taking the lamp off the table. If you look at it, what we're saying is that these processes, I believe up till now have been kind of big and blown out, and a lot of us didn't really understand them. And when I really asked some of these companies what they were doing in strategic planning, they couldn't answer me. And then I asked them if they did anything with it. No, they didn't. We just went and beat the heck out of everybody and tried to figure out where we're going to go, but we never really did anything with it. So we're now, if you want a strategic plan, build that infrastructure of your organization. Get those base skills to your employees, and that'll give you work from here on out. You'll never get finished with it because it's continuous improvement. Now let's look at the statistical process. We gave you a real simple one. It's not necessarily the funnest thing to go over. I know we had some engineers going to sleep on that one, but if you look at it, what we were talking about is that just kind of figure out where we're at. Try to get a handle on our processes and trying to get a handle on what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Trying to get a handle on getting rid of the special cause, bringing them in to statistic control, getting the base skills to bring it in here to where that's going to lower our cost of doing business. That'll in fact bring a quality not only to our customer but to our country, looking at creating value internally by providing a good product or service. And that's what we're talking, very simple process. It seems simple, but it's a little harder to get to. Y'all should have some of that stat stuff in class. in school. I lasted about 2 semesters of that. Let's look at now part 6. Part 6 is looking at the appreciation game participation. Really what this last part has been is to focus on our people and to focus on these things that are making it a little tough, not only at the organization but in our personal life. Looking at the fact of the compassion for one another. Look at it and remind and reinforce these things that should be important to us, but seems like over the last few decades we kind of lost sight of. In fact, most of us used to have a mama at home. They're hardly at home anymore. Most of us had a grandmama, aunt, uncle, people in the neighborhood. Those folks ain't there no more. So where are our kids going to get it? Well, they're getting it every other place except from where their parents. So if you're looking at, we need to really focus back in on what's important. And the encouraging thing that's out there, as I'm speaking to these college and high school kids, is that, man, they are pumped. They want values and ethics so bad it ain't even funny. And what's another interesting thing, I started speaking at USC out in California. It's a school out there and they got a business department. And what we were doing was speaking, and at all the time those kids, now this has been like 15 or 16 years ago, they all wanted to be investment bankers. They all wanted to do this finance. And what I saw was that change of an attitude to where they wanted to go in government. They wanted to make a change. They wanted to have an impact on their community. They wanted to contribute to society, because I think they've had enough to look at all the things out there that didn't benefit them as a kid, didn't benefit them as a family, didn't benefit the neighborhood, didn't benefit us as a country. So if you look at it, we ought to be real encouraged with what is happening out there in the workplace. And we ought to be real encouraged with the new generation that's coming out there, because I think they're going to kind of fix up some of the things that we've messed up out there. Let's look at page number 4, which is a tough decision. Tough decision is number 1, not firing anybody. A tough decision is holding accountable what we've agreed on. And we're looking at the life lesson. When dealing with tough decisions, deal only with data and not emotion, and it's really hard to separate it. This is a thing of the constant reinforcement of these things that we have to do. Do what we say we're going to do and hold it accountable. Now tell me, these tough decisions, do you think we have any at the house? You darn right. If you got any kids, about every other day is a tough decision. And that's what we're talking about, creating that discipline. Remember that discipline creates consistency, that promotes truth, that promotes trust, that starts bringing us together as an organization, as a family. Next, let's look at now on page 5, addressing quality issues. This is kind of a thing that we kind of drafted up there, talking about how are we going to address these people, personality, procedure issues that through this quality issue program and stuff that we've been talking about. We have that usually it needs to be a third party person involved in that. And what we're looking at is training and giving the skills to not necessarily human resource, not necessarily the training department or the quality department, but people internally within your organization, to give them a skill to almost negotiate conflict, to where they can get through and settle some of these issues. And what we're looking at here, as our skills grow and our awareness and understanding grows, we have less quality issues. It's like a bell curve. It goes like that. There's pent-up frustration, and then as we start getting through this, all of a sudden there becomes less quality issues, because now we can feel and comfortable that the company and the organization is going to support us. And the other interesting thing that we're looking at is that not only now, but we're not getting the heck whipped out of us every time we turn around. So what we're suggesting is that coordinator, let's just call it a quality issue coordinator if you ain't got nothing in there in your organization that's structured, that runs parallel to the organizational structure, because what happens is if they're a part of that, what they're going to do is get choked down by the departmental stuff, the systems, the 4 barriers to quality. So they need to be free to do what's morally and ethically correct, work the system, work the process, without getting beat up by anybody internally within the organization, and that's including their boss, and that's also including their co-workers and stuff. So now let's look at the next thing is the formalization of leadership, the Organization Playbook. And this is kind of what I told you that friend of mine, Steve Yamaguchi, the founder of one of the founders of quantum healthcare, basically as we met over the last 5 or 6 years, probably been longer than that now, is that what he said, he goes, Bruce, really what you've done is that you've created a playbook. And I said, well, what do you mean, Steve? He goes, when they hire a new coach, which they own some ball clubs and stuff, he goes, what's the coach do? Well, he brings a playbook. I go, well, yeah, he does. And so, well, what are you doing? You're really giving that CEO, that leadership, a playbook. You're saying, okay, this is how we're going to do business. This is how we're going to run the plays. These are the policies. These are the procedures. These are the base skills. These are the drills. And another interesting thing he said, he's going, Bruce, what you're doing is that you're practicing by having team meetings and by working on your processes, working on your steps, working on your procedures, working on your task teams, working on those base skills. He says, you're practicing. He goes, how long have you played football? I go, a gazillion years. He goes, what you do the first 5 years? Well, we learn how to block, learn what you do that second 5, learn how to block, what you do from there on out, learn how to block. We continually practice. And he goes, really what we do in business is that we don't practice. We just jump into the game and we kind of absorb the cuts and bruises and then we move on. So if you want to look at this, we're really looking at developing what we call an organization playbook, that no matter who comes in as leadership or who goes as leadership, we're saying here that the organization playbook, the infrastructure needs to stay the same. Don't allow somebody to come in and start cutting and spinning off divisions and doing all this other stuff. To meet artificially high stock prices, or to the manipulation to where in the world that we can get whatever it is that we want and be out of there in a year and a half. Because I've been in some of those organizations, the people are going to pick the slack up, but you're burning your people out, and them folks are gone. Look at all that leverage buyout stuff. Look at all that other junk they were talking about that was out there. A lot of those guys aren't around, but we put them on the cover of every magazine known to man. Well, we need to be putting on the cover of those magazines as somebody like Gordon Harbert. We need to be putting somebody like Mr. Boswell, Steve Yamaguchi. We need to be, but they're not high-profile people. What we found is most common folks ain't. And look at who's profiling them. That's another issue in our Reviving Base Values book. Now let's look at the next page, 7. It's called Applied Business Science Review and Actions. Really, what are we doing? We're looking at developing the organizational structure, the work centers, teams, team members, base work centers, process steps, the 4 problem-solving process. We're focusing on the 1. Brainstorming for those problems, and we didn't cover the safety or preventive or the systems review, but this is really what we looked at doing of what we've talked about over this Applied Business Science course. Now let's look at page number 8. It's the 4 barriers to quality. Here again is that survey. So no matter where you're at, here's a survey that you can use to go back in there and audit that thing. And remember, when you're looking at committing to quality, I never believed or never really understood, but the guy at the top, somebody has to make the decision, because making a decision to change or improve the business is not a popular decision, and you're not going to get all buy-in. So the guy at the top has to make the decision. So we also have the quality issue rating, turn over, and you'll also see the corporate citizenship survey. Now let's look at some frequently asked questions. Why are the base skills so important? After everything that we talked about here, I think you understand now why we're saying base skills. Remember, a lot of you up front were saying base skills, so that's somebody down on the floor. We're saying these base skills, and I think what you've seen now, what we talked about, have to be throughout the organization for continuance and growth. What is building business infrastructure? It's literally taking an organization apart, pulling it apart by systems, breaking it down by processes, breaking that down by base work centers, training the base skills of our employees to define specific their base work center process steps and procedures, and to organize those base work centers. That will in turn lower our cost of doing business. Why are systems important? Why? Whether we like it or not, we already have systems. Probably 90% of them are informal. And if you look at it, the systems are important because as we define them, that's going to improve not only our accountability, but as we define it, we're going to have something that we can continuously improve. So it has to be, but it has to be a formal system. We're saying here, if nothing else, we want you to leave with the 99% focus. We want you to focus on the 99% of your employees that are good people, that are doing the right thing, to be supportive, positive, giving them the tools of success, giving them encouragement. Don't focus on that 1%. Remember, we're jumping through hoops trying to keep them happy, and they'll never be happy. Focus on the good folks that are trying. And I want you to think about it, and if you're in management, make a note of who that 1% is. And then you start looking at their actions with this understanding, and you'll see that. And immediately, I want you to turn and focus on your 99%. Every time that 1% comes up and gets in your face, I want you to, number one, be able to hold him accountable now with a process, step, or procedure, or give them the tools to define it, or give them the opportunity and give it back and let them fix it. You're going to see they're not. But we want you to turn around and focus on the 99%. Leadership has to lead and set the example. What we're saying here, your organization, your employees are powerless. There's absolutely no way for them to change the organization without the support at the top, real support, a real program, long-term commitment. It's not everybody hopping on a plane, going somewhere, getting all fired up. We sign off of it and come back and it's business as usual. We're talking about long-term commitment from here on out of what we have to do and make it a cost of doing business. I know we have some folks out there squealing, well, that'll cost us X amount. If you manage, plan, schedule, and monitor, you won't miss it. What do you mean by the employees? I already said that one. What are the effects of the 4 barriers to quality on my organization? I think if you look at it, you can now look and stand back and see the effects of those 4 barriers to quality with these problems that we're interacting with daily, these fires that we're putting out, the good employees that we're losing. We're having to jump through hoops for the 1% that are holding us hostage. We really appreciate your time today. We really want you to step back and look at how we can take and turn this applied business science into some base skills for our employees that are going to help our organization for continuance and growth. And remember, you're just at the start of it, but this will give you the tools from here on out to continually work and improve your organization and give your employees an opportunity to contribute and to be successful. Thank you, and you have a good day.